I actually don't have to do my research on our next presenter because I know his work and I follow his work since the first time he was presenting here at the Beyond Festival. Mark Post is already setting up here. He's a professor. Basically, for what he became famous is something that looks a bit weird, but actually when you dig more into it, it's not. It's cultivating stem cells. If you ever heard of Beyond Meat, Impossible Meat, have you heard of Bill Gates or Leonardo DiCaprio who are investing in those companies who are trying to find the solution for, well, basically feeding all of us, feeding the 10 billion people, billion? Yeah. Billion people who will be on this planet by 2050 latest, I guess. Mark is one of the first ones who has been researching and working in this field, and basically he inspired me to not eat beef anymore, right, since he was here. No, seriously.
Really?
Yes. You have been a big influencer in my life. So without any further ado, I would say, please welcome Mark Post.
Well, thank you. So I didn't realize, to be honest, that I was in a session that was called PostCapitalsm. First, an anecdote that doesn't really have a big relationship with what I'm going to talk about. I moved 22 times in my life. And there were two institutions that kept tracking me throughout my life. That was the Catholic Church and the BMW dealership. And although I stopped going to church 50 years ago and I stopped driving a BMW 30 years ago, they kept tracking me. And I will come back to the church part of it, not to the BMW part of it. So, as mentioned, we're going to 10 billion people in 2050, and not only to more people, but also to more sophisticated needs for food, for different types of food, and especially foods that are really, really expensive. So if we think about food, I was recently in Milan, so I showed this picture. This is kind of the romantic version of food, if you like. It's a social construction. It's not only nutrition, as maybe some people in the northern European countries think of food as nutrition, as we tend to do in the Netherlands. But it's also a social construct. It's an excuse to get together and to socialize and to enjoy food and to talk about food. This is kind of the Silicon Valley version of food. It's completely deconstructed into bottles that contain all the nutritional components, contain all the calories, sugars, amino acids, vitamins, minerals, everything that you need. And it comes in a huge variety of 4 flavors. And you basically don't have to step away from your computer. You can continue to work and you can continue to do things. And you don't, and most importantly, you don't have to socialize. So we have a choice here at some point to make. So my point is, I love meat. Who of you, by the way, is vegetarian? I'm in Germany, so mostly it's usually a higher percentage, yes, as I expected. I love meat because I'm simply a deeply flawed person, and I know that I shouldn't, but I do. And why is that a sort of a sin in my mind? It's because meat is an incredibly expensive protein to make. For a quarter pounder of beef, we require about 8 pounds of grain, 9 square meters of land, 1,200 liters of water, fresh water, and about as much power to power your microwave for about 10 minutes. So it's an incredibly expensive source. Why is that? It's because cows are really, really inefficient. This is a conversion ratio. If you look at animals, which is somewhat derogative, but if you look at animals as converters of plant-based plant proteins to animal proteins, they are incredibly inefficient. If you nowadays would design a system to make animal proteins, you would never come up with a cow, right? It's incredibly inefficient. So we can all become vegetarian. There are quite a few in this room. They are here, so they are apparently healthy and You can do that. We don't need animal proteins per se. But that's not the point. We love them. And it's not only, even if in Germany or in Berlin or in Zurich, the number of vegetarians is increasing and the number of vegans is increasing, worldwide, that's not the case. Worldwide, it's quite the reverse trend. This is the human trophic level. It's where we are in the food chain. It's 1 for a plant. It's 2 for an animal that eats plants. It's 3 for an animal that eats animals that eats plants. So we are at 2.35, which is the sort of the top pink graph. And the bottom graph is the track following India and China over the last 30 years. They're gradually creeping up to that same number. And that's because that statistic, that human trophic level, is linearly related to the gross domestic product of a country. So as soon as people become rich, they start to eat meat. And this may be some sort of copycat behavior of sort of Western society. Whatever the reason is, we don't know, but this is what is happening if you describe it. So if you like it or not, we are facing a future of meat. And of course, I'm sometimes holding these talks to pig farmers and cattle farmers or people from the meat industry. They say, nice, we're facing a future of meat. But there are a lot of problems associated with that, and they actually realize that. So the technology that we have started in 2004 is based on stem cells. You can make meat basically from any tissue, basically. It doesn't matter what type of tissue you can make from stem cells. This is a muscle cell. It's a very peculiar cell. It's a merger of a number of cells, hence the blue guys are the nuclei of the cell. And so it has a couple of nuclei because it's a merger. And the yellow guy, which looks like kind of an egg, is actually the stem cell of our muscle. So they are sitting there waiting to repair tissue when it's injured. And when your muscle is injured, they start to proliferate and they start to form tissue. And they can do that inside of the body, but they can also do that outside of the body. And that's exactly what we're doing. So we poke a cow in the butt, get a small sliver of muscle out of it, 1 centimeter long, 1 millimeter in diameter, has a couple of hundred of these stem cells, and we let the stem cells proliferate. They do that pretty much automatically. We have to create the conditions, but they do that automatically. Then we say, well, stop. We now have enough cells. Stop dividing. So we basically starve them, and then they stop dividing, and then they start to merge into a primitive muscle fiber. They do that by themselves. We don't really have to do anything complex. Then, of course, cells are edible, but they're not really tasty, and they don't have a lot of protein, and it's not meat, it's cells. So you want to make a tissue out of it. This is where tissue engineers come in. I call myself a tissue engineer. And here it's relatively simple to make small fibers, small muscle fibers. You basically put them in a gel where they can connect to each other, and they can find each other, squeeze out all the water, compact, make a tissue, align. And interestingly, I never realized that, but our muscle cells, also your muscle cells, are exercise junkies, right? Our brains are not, but these cells are not connected to a brain, so they start contracting. And because they are attached to each other and because they are in a ring structure, that contraction translates into tension. And some of you may go to the gym, or some of you may even run marathons. If you run marathons, you don't get thick muscles because movement itself doesn't do it. You have to pump iron. You have to lift weights to get thick muscles. And that's exactly what's happening here. So because they're in a ring structure, they start to contract and they start to put on protein. So after 3 weeks, you have a muscle fiber that looks under the microscope exactly the same as the muscle fiber from a steak. And we made 10,000 of these muscle fibers, put it in a patty, and had it cooked in 2013 in London by a very courageous chef. This hamburger cost 250,000 euro. And it was eaten by 2 food critics, one from Austria and one from Chicago. And they said, oh yeah, this is a hamburger. Was a little bit dry, was not quite, the high-quality hamburger that you would expect of €250,000, but it was a hamburger. So that was a proof of concept. And then, of course, we thought, well, we are in this to create a solution for that problem of resource intenseness and all the consequences of meat that comes with it. So you want to make it efficient, you want to make it sustainable, and you want to create meat because it's meat is something that we love. We don't necessarily need it, but we love. So this subject, so I can go into a lot of technical details. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go into some details, but not in all of them. But so we are basically using stem cells, and stem cells do two things. They actually divide what we call asymmetrically. So when they divide, they produce a stem cell, which keeps continuing the cycle, and they divide into a daughter cell, and that daughter cell actually starts to proliferate much faster, and that makes the muscle tissue. And when we were talking to investors, some of them said, well, but you still have to poke the cow in the butt. And we really don't want to use animals for human purposes in the end. Okay, fair. It's a little bit extreme, but if I thought I'm doing a good thing, I'm going to reduce the 1.5 billion cows on this planet to 35,000, so, be happy. But some were not happy enough, and they said, well, no, it's the principle thing. We don't want to use cows for human purposes. So can you actually keep those stem cells eternally going? Again, money talks, I guess, so we worked on that project, and we continue to do that, and we can actually prolong the life of those stem cells and keep them going for a longer time. And eventually, of course, our goal is also to poke the cow in the butt as little times as we can. And there are technologies to do that, and eventually we will get there, I guess.